Hello, my name's James Piecowye. This is Podaholiks, and the program you're dialed into is DocTalk with Dr. Jenna Burton. And what's that mean? We're just going to be talking about stuff. We're going to be talking about, well, in this episode, front and center vaccines. And ultimately, you just never know where it's going to go when Jenna and I get jabbing away. So, Jenna, great to have you back.
So, James, what I've noticed you do that I absolutely love is you always start like with a little laugh. And I always think, what's funny, James?
That's my thing.
What's funny? What's tickled your fancy?
You know what? It's just the fun of doing this. And it's kind of my thing when I'm getting warmed up and I hear the tune. And it's just like, I just kind of laugh because It's like, we did it again. Here we are.
I know, actually, but this is so more convenient. So now we're using like a conferencing call, aren't we? We're doing Zoom. Yeah. And it just makes it so much easier and more accessible, and we're getting everyone together and we're all having conversations. It's great.
And you know, the one of the things is I was talking to a coach, a personal trainer yesterday that I've done some work with, not gone for coaching, but actually we've done a tag team session that we did about a year ago in Madrid, Spain for IBM. And he was talking about word of mouth. I was talking about using social media, and we were training IBMers on how to just be better communicators. And there's a whole bunch of people I met there who now we're connecting up again, A, through podcasting, B, through Zoom and this video conferencing services, and having these conversations that we haven't had in years or in a year. And we kept saying for months that, we got to do this. We got to do this. And I said to Andy Ryder is this man's name. And I guess he's in Wales is where he lives right now. And Andy said to me, he says, you know what, if COVID-19 has done one thing, it's made everyone say, you know what, don't put off. Yeah. It's like, because who would have thought we would be living in a lockdown situation or that we wouldn't be able to get on an aircraft and travel to wherever we wanted to go? Well, that happened. And so it's sort of like, well, when do you want to talk? It's like, okay, well, let's, how about 2 days? And it's like, okay. And everyone's booking it in and everyone's there. So I'm really excited about all of this.
Especially as an expatriate, because I spend so much time away from people that I really, really love. And what's really nice now is that I get to, I could do it before, I could speak to them before, but you just don't. No. So I'd speak to them occasionally, but we wouldn't get like the whole team, like my brother, my mom, her partner. We wouldn't get everybody in. And now we get everybody together, and we have group dinners and we have drinks over Zoom, and it's fabulous. And it's, like you say, it's kind of pushed us to do something that we should have been doing before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or we could have been doing before, at least.
Yeah, we could have been doing it, but we weren't. Jenna, we've got, when we start talking medical world and we start talking about things that are going on, we're going to talk about vaccines, but I want to talk about me first.
Because you talk about you. Is this going to be about your hip flexor?
It is going to be about my hip flexor. And it's funny because it's been bugging me for, a good month. And I had to make an appointment and go and see, in this case, my osteopath. And go in and the first thing he says, you've been sitting a lot? And I said, yeah. And I got a long history of things with running and stuff, as we do. And he says, you've been sitting a lot? Yeah. He says, when's the last time you were here? And I'm going, I don't know. And he looks back and goes, oh yeah, like 18 months. Like, what's going on? I said, well, I figured stretching would work and this would work. And I said, it does. But now I'm spending even more time at my desk, and it's really exacerbated this pain and some of it, going with the sciatic nerve and things. And he just kind of looked at me, and we did some stuff, and he kind of goes, you know what? It's fascia. You've got this fascia that because I started, through our conversations, one thing that I've come to know is you got to have as much detail as you can and be able to explain it as well as you can, so that general practitioner, so that medical person can actually start to make sense of what you're saying. And so I was describing things, showing them things, and I'm saying, it's unbelievable. Underneath my heel hurts. This is where it hurts. And then if I do this, it's kind of like my lower back. And then, it's behind my knee. And he's going, yeah, it's fascia. And he's, a few movements, totally tight. Yeah. And he sort of loosened everything off. And what did he say to me? He says, you got to keep stretching. And I said, yeah, but I do stretch. He goes, 20 minutes every morning. You need to be doing this stretching routine. And he kind of looked at me and laughed, and he said, if all of the people who come to me did a good 15, 20 minutes of stretching every day, I'd probably see a quarter of them compared to what I see now. And he says, it's just stretching.
When I was a child, my mum would always laugh at my dad because every day for a good half an hour, he just spent every morning stretching, and he still does it now. And he has had the last laugh. Like my dad, he's still mobile, he's active. He has a few injuries from football, but generally he's in good nick, really.
Yeah.
And I do wonder how much stretching has contributed to that. So he doesn't do yoga, he doesn't do Pilates, two things that are brilliant for people to do, but he stretches every single morning without fail.
I think it's clearly had an impact. And I do a bit of yoga now, but I really love the one that's the deep stretch yoga. So we were doing that one the other day, and I can't believe how wonderful I felt when it was done. But when I say deep stretch, 5 minutes holding some of these poses, but not the crazy yoga poses when you think of the holding a sun salutation or whatever warrior pose, not those kind of things. Just really good hip stretches, really good leg stretches, but we were holding them for 5 minutes, and it was interesting because
wow.
1 minute, well, you're holding it for 1 minute, it's okay, and then 2 minutes, and then suddenly you're able to bend a little further, and then 2 minutes 50 seconds. Oh, hold on, everything's released. I can move a little further, and it was so rewarding. And when you were done, it was just like, okay, I feel really good. Got to do, and it was just that. Why aren't we doing more of this? And then I think of your boys running around, and I'm thinking, but as kids, all they're doing is stretching. They're lying in funny places, and they're just getting everything so limber. It's just a natural thing that we kind of lose.
But plus, everybody is a lot more supple as a child. Everything starts to stiffen up as we get older. And I feel exceptionally hypocritical when I am talking about this.
Exceptionally hypocritical.
I have got the tightest, you just have to ask my trainer, I've got the tightest hamstrings in the world. And I love stretching upper body. Yeah. I love stretching anterior chain legs. But I have got this weird thing that I hate the sensation of stretching my hamstrings. I'd rather work out for an hour and run around and work hard than stretch my hamstrings. I hate the sensation, but probably because they are so tight after years of not stretching. So I appreciate the benefits to it. Yeah. And it's something that I always say, I need to do more of, and I suffer because of it. So I have the same plantar fasciitis, lower back issues. Yeah. And it's all totally avoidable.
Well, it was interesting because today when one of the, all these muscles were getting loosened up, and then there was just sort of I moved in a certain way, and I just felt my whole hip kind of reposition, and I was just moving sideways. And he said, okay, I just want you to move sideways, just move sideways. And it was just a natural body move, and you could feel something that was with some muscle that just went pop. And at that moment, it was like, whoa. Everything that I was just feeling coming in here is gone. And it was interesting.
Do you know, James, we've got to give a shout out to osteopaths, because I've had so many people tell me they've had relief from back pain, from headaches, from tension in the jaw, like chronic jaw pain and neck problems, all from osteopaths. Yeah. And in England, I don't know what it's like in Canada, but they're not really the most respected allied healthcare professional. And I think doctors, I've got to say, kind of like dismiss osteopaths and chiropractors. I know less about chiropractors. I tend to use osteopaths, I think, because of the duration of training tends to be longer, but that doesn't mean that a chiropractor's not got their place. It's just not something that I tend to use. But osteopaths are exceptionally well trained, and in America, they have to go through a medical degree in order to go through to osteopathy. Since coming to Dubai, and obviously osteopaths have got good marketing, I worked next door to an osteopath, a very good osteopath. And since then, and having seen the results that they give, having used them myself, I tell you what, I have an awful lot of respect for your standard osteopath, and I will be making use of them in the future as well.
I got to say, I was a total naysayer about osteopaths, and I was going to a physiotherapist, and I had chronic shoulder pain from swimming. So anyone who does a lot of front crawl and a lot of breaststroke will know that as you're putting in 1 kilometer or 2, and if you do that consistently and you don't stretch, you're going to develop quite a nice shoulder pain. And so I was going to a physiotherapist, and I'd 10, 15 visits I'd been to, and she, where she's doing some stuff, she goes, how are you feeling? I go, it's not feeling any better. In fact, today I think it's worse. And she goes, okay, you got to go see this osteopath next door to me. And I did. And I went for one visit, and the pain that I'd been suffering was gone. It's like, what?
Yeah.
One visit and it was gone.
Well, they kind of reset you, don't they, back to the beginning? And physiotherapists are brilliant.
No,
but
exactly.
everybody's got their place, and they are the master of the spine. That's their bread and butter. Is everything from the bottom of your neck right the way down to your bum cheeks. That is their specialty, and that's what they do all day, every day. So why not use them for back pain?
Yeah. So I'm very happy, and it worked out well. But it was funny because
you're in good shape.
For now, I am, and the best part of it was, or the worst part of it was, it just confirmed something that we've been talking about, in that now everyone's sitting in front of computers and we're watching screens and we're sitting in these positions that we shouldn't be. I mean, even at work, I have a stand-up desk. I don't have a stand-up desk at home because I didn't usually do so much work at home. And now I'm suffering for it. I really need to adjust my workspace a bit because it's having a detrimental effect on me. And I can only imagine the number of students, the number of teachers, the number of folks like yourself who are now working distant, how all of these people are starting to show signs, I'm sure, of issues because of how we're working right now. So,
well, it's there's so many things. There's shoulders, but even I'm just going to get out my amber eyewear glasses, because one of the big things is eye strain, isn't it? Like, so I've purchased a pair of glasses which are very non-flattering online. Which absorb the blue light from screens, because I was suffering terribly with headaches, having moved to more office-based job, looking at a computer. And who doesn't look at a computer these days? Everybody's looking at a computer.
All day.
And there's an awful lot of ocular problems that are occurring with that, and a large part of that is looking constantly at blue light. So I was putting the sleep mode on, the nighttime mode on my computers, on my phones, and everything would look this horrible shade of yellowy orange. And now I've got my glasses. I don't get the headaches, and you get the nice bright screen. It's
wow.
Fantastic.
There you go. I think everyone needs to be thinking about that now, and it's important. News today, I was really surprised, and it's the politics of the medical profession, with the United States questioning now the World Health Organization and wanting to pull away its funding. So I thought, really, is this the time to be doing that? and I thought, as I was listening to President Donald Trump talk about his concerns, and I'm sure there's concerns in all countries. I mean, it's easy to look back at something and make an assessment as opposed to at the time. But I thought, a little bit like the kettle calling the pot black in some of the things that the president is suggesting versus what the governors of states are saying they want to do. And it's, and then all I keep thinking is, what is the science on your side here, sir? This becomes really interesting, because I'm not so sure the science is on his side for rebooting the economy, etc.
It's scary, isn't it, that they would take away what is one of the very few international healthcare bodies. So they don't just look after one country. They have the ability to have oversight over everybody. And so to pull that is quite a scary thought. But, no country works in total isolation. There's always got to be the consideration of other countries and what's suffering. And it would only be to detriment, I believe, to America and other surrounding countries, but more so to America to pull that. So I sincerely hope that is a hollow threat.
I hope so. One of the interesting things, though, today, so I was looking at the situation report number 85, the coronavirus disease 2019.
You've looked at this in detail, James.
Situation report 85, in case anyone's looking. And this is the first time that, so there, of course, you get all of the numbers, and this is their daily report. And it's kind of interesting, because my wife and I, we really have cut back on the amount of news we're watching and news we're looking at, simply because, as the World Health Organization has said today, we have an infodemic on our hands, and they're really addressing this whole fact that we have an overabundance of information at the moment. And that overabundance of information is not only of credible information, but of garbage information, and of people just, and one might say, well, James, you're contributing to it right now by talking about this report, but people who are philosophizing and punditing on these things, that sometimes you just got to tune it out. And it's just overloading us, creating more anxiety, creating more skepticism, creating more distrust. And, well, heck, I was talking with someone today, Jenna, and I couldn't believe my ears. And I said, but I just looked at them and I didn't pass judgment. I didn't even roll my eyes. I didn't start laughing.
Are you thinking they were too young?
Well, no, that's the thing. They're not even too young. I'm kind of going, you can't be saying this. But all I did was I said, I just looked at them and I said, you know what? You got to go with the science. You can't just go with the rumor, with the gut, with where that's it. You got to go with the science. And so the issue that they were coming at is that rumor that maybe there's a COVID-19 link with 5G. And I'm going, you got to have science there, my friend. And I just looked at him, I said, I just really at that moment, like you just did, you just held your head and shook it. I just went, I tried, I didn't want to laugh at the person, right? I just went, and I just took a deep breath and I just said, you have to go with science. And I said, if we're going to go down that route, then every type of electromagnetic wave could be having some form of effect on us. But we're talking about a virus. And a virus is as a pathogen, is a physical thing, not an electromagnetic wave going through the air. Like they're two totally different things. I said, what's the science and what does logic tell us about this? And I said,
sorry, go on, James.
No, all I was going to say is you just got to think about this a little bit. And if the science comes out that way, great. Is there but this is just infodemic. I said, this is it.
Well, but this is the problem. So I've purposely not really written too much on my social media about coronavirus, and people are asking me questions. And it's like, look, you've got to get your sources from the World Health Organization, the CDC, and your local government bodies. And I think we've had conversations, but more about how it's affecting people.
Yeah.
I've written about the anxiety, about basically how people are perceiving COVID and how they're coping with it. I think it's totally appropriate for physicians on the front line to describe their experience.
Absolutely.
But potentially inappropriate for them to talk about the next steps and what's happening because they haven't got the oversight either. I think we've got to listen to the people that are in the know. And I tell you what, it's not the majority of the population. So if people are posting these on social media, be careful, be very careful, because I know I wouldn't be reading them and I won't be paying attention to them because they're just not in the know. And so many of us aren't. And even the big bodies are saying check daily because they aren't really in the know, but they have a bit more knowledge than we do.
Yeah. Well, I think what becomes interesting is, so I'm Canadian, so I find myself listening to the Canadian government, what they're talking about, and with a vested interest. I'd like to be able to think I can go home to visit my family at some point in the next year, and there's a little bit of apprehension,
James.
right? Because now we constantly look at things every day, and we're going, and the big conversation at our house is, I don't think we're going to be traveling this summer. And it's like, because we're thinking second and third waves in the back of our minds, saying, okay, hold on. And if we go back to, say, we can fly back to Canada, if an airline is going there, and let's say, according to Air France's calculations, they might be at 70% operation, thinking what they're putting today, and we typically fly that airline. Am I going to get quarantined when I fly to Canada? Am I going to get quarantined when I come back here? And I'm going, well, if that's going to happen, that's a month. Well, that's not going to work. And so, all of these questions start to sort of flow around. But where this was going with talking about the Canadian government is, okay, so I got the Canadian federal government, then we've got the Canadian provincial governments, we've got the Canadian territorial governments. So you've got suddenly all these different experts who, some of them have different opinions. As you know, doctors can have different opinions even when reading the science.
Right.
And it's so I start looking at all that and going, man, this is very problematic. We need to be very careful about how we say things, what we read, and what we take from them. And the sad reality is, as you would know this as well as I do, is we tend to gravitate towards those media, those news, those information sources that support the opinions we want anyway. So if you want an opinion that's going to be very negative, you tend to go that way all the time. And if you want something that tends to be a little bit more upbeat and a little bit more optimistic, you probably always go towards those sources. So it's an interesting time, and the information is great and it's horrible.
And to be honest, I think there's no point in making predictions as a member of the general public and as a member of staff in healthcare. There's still no point in making predictions, and we by nature like to know, don't we? And I think a lot of people like to feel in control of their life, and the reality at this moment in time is we have no control. Yeah. So sit back, just wait for the ride, try not to think about a day ahead. It must be terrible for you because your boys are in Canada. I know my parents are in the UK, and that's quite distressing if you think of, when am I going to get to see them again? And we have elderly family as well. Yeah. Are we going to get to see them again? But those thoughts, they're just, if you find it helpful to think about and to accept, then do so. Otherwise, just sit back and just take a day at a time, because we just don't know. They might decide that, the bans are going to be lifted sooner because the benefits don't outweigh the costs. So we just don't know.
No, exactly. So it's a day by day thing, and governments have to weigh it out. And that's an interesting one, going back to President Trump, and he wants to restart that American economy. And I get it. We're a very small country here, the United Arab Emirates, but we also have a fairly vibrant tourism economy. We have a manufacturing economy. We have a trading economy. There's nowhere I can think of that would want to be active with all of its industries. And the UAE has shut everything down, really, this entire country. And I'm thinking, what forward-thinking folks to actually say, look, this is what you've got to do, is you've got to isolate everyone. Let the virus work its way through, as few interactions as possible, so that it gets rid of that period, that, whatever it is, 21 days probably is the number I keep hearing. 14 days is what we typically see people quarantined for. 21 days probably makes more sense, but anywhere in there. But you need people not to interact with each other for that time, so that there's no community spread. And we've been almost a month now that we've been going through various phases of that in the UAE. There's, again, the science tells us this works, and this is how you're going to make your country work. I just can't imagine what the American president's thinking. I mean, it's short-term thinking, not long-term thinking.
Well, yes and no. I do understand where the thought process is coming from, because there are other negatives to social isolation. By the way, I'm practicing social isolation, and I do believe that is the better of the two, and if we can save lives, fantastic.
What are the negatives? But, what are some of the negative issues?
Well, we were talking about it the other day, weren't we? In the sense that there are a lot of people that are not presenting to hospital that are unwell because they are frightened of coronavirus. In fact, even an example close to home, I have an uncle who is very poorly. He collapsed 3 times. He has a pacemaker in. And they think he's broken his arm. The ambulance came to get him, and he would not leave his house.
Really?
He was terrified of going to hospital. Now, I get quite worried that obviously he has a cardiac condition that is clearly out of control and needs to be managed, but he's so frightened he will not go to the hospital. And this is not an isolation, especially in pediatrics. Yeah. People are not taking their children to hospital to seek appropriate care. In children, diseases present quite late, especially infectious diseases, because children can compensate and use compensatory mechanisms to keep them looking well, to keep them feeling well as long as possible, and then they crash quite quickly. So it's really important that children do get to hospital and do get seen when, parents have got that, just not quite happy with them, there's something not quite right, they're not eating as much as normal. And so therefore we've got pediatric emergencies that are not presenting till either late, so it's difficult to treat them, or too late, which is really sad. Also, we've touched on before, there's going to be in my opinion, a huge mental health spike. Yeah. There's a lot of elderly, less 75, but overseas, a lot of elderly people that are isolating totally on their own. I've been contacted by numerous people to say, what can I do to help my mum or my grandparents? And it's very difficult. You send them generic crib sheets out saying, keep a routine, try and keep active, keep on the telephone, remember to eat well. And it's really quite generic stuff, but ultimately that doesn't take away that feeling of loneliness. People were meant to be tactile creatures. So you've got mental health from isolation, and also mental health from stress of financial concerns, losing jobs. There's definitely going to be an increase in suicide rate, if not already. And at the moment, we're probably not even looking at that because of COVID. There's also been some data to suggest, and again, just to say, I am effectively an uneducated person who is reading literature that is available to everybody. So I'm not a government source, but there is some literature to suggest that a lot of the people, not everybody, especially not the younger people, there's a lot of literature to say that people that are dying with COVID would have died probably within the next 12 months, but COVID is bringing it a little bit sooner. So there's a huge exponential rise in death rate, but they believe, and they being some research experts that have been hired by certain universities, believe that there will be a huge slump in death rate over the next 12 months because the people that were potentially going to pass away through COVID, it's been shifted forward.
Right.
But I read a terrible story about a UK nurse today, 28 pregnant, that died. That is, as far as I'm concerned, an unnecessary death. They managed to save the baby, but she died. And so that is not across the board. That is just researchers looking from different angles. So I still, as I say, I'm practicing social isolation. I'm like you, James. We're here, we're at home. I'm wearing my husband's clothing as we are chatting. But at the same time, I do understand that there is a debate to be had. It's not quite as straightforward. This is what we need to do. Yeah. There is a debate. And I'm certainly not going to be the one to say whether Donald Trump is right or not. It doesn't sound like it, but I'm sure there's more depth to it than we are privy to.
We're going to let his administration deal with that and let the states of the United States work through it. And we get to be the spectators. We get to be those who watch. And you know what the sad thing is? The judgment of all of our decisions and what we did and why we did it and why we didn't do things, give it a year's time. There will be a lot of introspection and a lot of, if only we had. So when something like this happens again, we'll be a lot more prepared and hopefully we're on the right track, which brings us to where we actually wanted to go, because one of the things we hear so much about, that's not bad, 27 minutes, 30 seconds into this podcast, we finally get to what we set out to talk about. But I think everything we spoke about has been germane to just getting people thinking a little bit and sort of saying, okay, yeah, right, it's not all doom and gloom. But one of the cool things and one of the scary things is we're really talking about, okay, is there a vaccine that we can create that is going to give us some form of immunity to this? And it's really bringing to light science. It's putting science back in the spotlight. It's putting vaccinations and the role of vaccinations back in the spotlight. And it's bringing a lot of questions about science out again. And I mean, good questions about how does it work and what does that mean? And what kind of vaccines do we have? And how do the vaccines work? Because they don't all work the same way. And I find it really interesting. And I also find it humbling because it's a whole area of conversation and discussion and research that I really kind of just ignored. And I think, like a lot of people, I kind of went, okay, science is not my big thing. I mean, I took biology and I took chemistry and I took physics and all those in high school, and I didn't do bad. I didn't do great, but I didn't go the science route leaving high school. So a lot of that thought process just kind of left things. And I realized, man, you know what? I should have paid a little bit more attention, or I wish I'd taken, some more sciences at university level just to really be a little bit more, have a little bit more of the background in some of these processes and some of these things that we're talking about, because it's...
James, you understand all of it. Stop playing it down. I've never known anyone to know so much about everything. So these are lies. These are lies. Barefaced lies. But it's true.
You put together quite we got great talking notes, and the first thing I noticed in the, as an academic and as an educator, the first thing I did is looked at all the sources, and I went, man, these are great sources. Like, this is a great sheet of material, which I we don't use a website yet for Podaholiks, but I know that you use your own socials. I'm going to put the crib sheet up on my own blog because with our show, because it's just great and there's so much information.
If you were marking my work, James, with a red pen, would I get a good score?
Yeah, you'd get a good score right now. Yeah, I would have given you a good grade.
We discussed the other day about being a teacher's pet, and I always like to be the teacher's pet, so it makes you feel good.
I'm very keen to shout out students, and I do this in my own class, and they'll tell you I shout out students who do great work, and those who don't do such great work, I shout them out too. But I also I'll shout out what they did well, because I had some students who were telling me, you're a little negative on some of the work we do, and it's like, well, your work's terrible, but okay, well, what's the positive thing in your work? And there's always something, but I always like to frame it, and then I often, students say, sir, you kind of do it the same way all the time. And I said, yeah, but are you happy with what you did? Do you see where you can improve? And they always come back and say, yeah, you've narrowed it down. I know exactly what I need to do. And I said, not that what you need to do is easy. It's not, but at least you know what you have to work on. And they go, yeah, you're right. And there are always good things in the stuff we do. But no, I thought it was very interesting right off the bat, the whole question, because we hear, we need to get vaccines. And if you've got, everyone in their life has had a vaccine at some point. Parents are, giving their kids vaccines now. If you travel, you typically have been vaccinated for certain things. But I sometimes don't think people understand what vaccines are and what vaccination actually is. They just kind of go and do it and say, yeah, I'm getting something put into me. It's going to help me. And away we go. And I think
it's quite interesting. We can touch on exactly what a vaccination is in a moment. But what I find really funny is that there's so many people now don't want to get vaccinated because they're thinking, what's in this? What's in this? What am I giving my child? And they're scared of the vaccination. And suddenly COVID has come out and the vaccine is being effectively rushed together an awful lot quicker than it would be normally. The HIV vaccine that they've struggled with, they've earmarked optimistically 2030 for a date for a vaccination to be put through. So here's COVID being absolutely accelerated through this process, and everyone wants it right now. Even though it's probably going to be a little bit of tweaking later down the line.
Well, I just kind of look at it and say, even at, best of opportunity, we're looking at a year, and say, well, how fast we can do this. The science only works, and I mean, it's the testing, it's the incubation, it's the understanding what's going on. Great, we know the sequencing very nicely, but what's actually going to work, how it's going to work, how it's going to interact with things, that's all a lot of trial and error. And it's at least the entire world, and we've got microbiology labs worldwide are playing with this, and they're sharing, which typically doesn't happen. But like you said, the HIV virus, the HIV vaccine, they're still years off, 10 years if they're lucky, could be even longer. There's lots of antivirals that they can use, but they haven't got a vaccine for it.
I think it's because HIV is particularly difficult in the sense that HIV goes and immediately hides within your cells, and then the response when it does decide to activate is so massive that your immune response, which is mediated by the vaccine, just isn't really strong enough. So at the moment, to describe how the vaccination works, I think a lot of people are becoming a lot more aware because of Google, Professor Google. It is educating us. But effectively, every virus, every bacteria has a little signal which is attached to the cells, and it says, this is what I am, and I'm not part of the body, and I am an invader. And your immune system recognizes the signal, thinks, yep, this is an invader, it shouldn't be here, let's kill it. And when it recognizes that signal, it then keeps an immune response, so it keeps like a memory cells, so that when it comes across it again in the future, your immune response is so much quicker and explosive that it can mop up the virus, the bacteria really quickly. So what a vaccination is, and there's different types of vaccinations, but effectively it's a fake signal so that your body, your immune system can basically recognize the signal, learn from it, but you don't actually get the virus or the bacteria, but you do get the memory cells that in the future, when you do come across that virus or bacteria, it'll wipe it out quickly. And as I said, there are different types. Sometimes you get a live vaccine, but a very weak version that can make you feel more poorly. Sometimes you just get a portion of a portion of the virus or bacteria. Sometimes you get basically a dead one, a dead bacterial virus, but it still has those signals on. And sometimes you only get subject to the toxins that the virus or the bacteria produce.
You know what? I've got a great list. You've got, as you said, the live
conjugated as well,
live attenuated vaccines that fight virus and bacteria. The inactivated vaccines they can also do this, made by inactivating or killing the germ during the process of making the vaccine. Toxoids prevent disease caused by bacteria that produce toxins, poisons in the body. In the process of making these vaccines, the toxins are weakened so they can't cause illness. The ones that I really loved was the subunit vaccines, that parts of the virus or bacteria, and then instead of they give sub parts of it instead of the entire germ. And then the conjugate vaccines fight different types of these things, and they have antigens in them, outer coating of sugar-like substances. And I just thought, man, that the conjugate one sounds really cool. And
I mean, it depends on what vaccine you have, but there are slight differences to them. So, for instance, a live vaccine can give you a longer immunity because you get a stronger response from it, so you don't tend to need as many boosters. However, you can't give them to immunosuppressed. You've got to be careful. Like some of them, you can't give if you're pregnant. But there is a general rule of thumb for all vaccinations, which is if you're a bit under the weather, don't bother because your immune system is already engaged.
So it's all about immune systems.
It's a natural response. You're stimulating a natural response. So, for instance, if I caught chickenpox, I'm not going to catch it again because I've got the immune response to chickenpox. That's the usual scenario, isn't it? And it's why parents have chickenpox parties. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, when a child's got chickenpox and they invite the community, come and get your chickenpox and get it out the way now. I know it's something that they did years ago when I was a child. My mum held one. Rightly or wrongly, that's what they do. And the idea is it's your own immune system. So you're triggering your own immune system to that bacterial virus, and then your immune system keeps the memory in the back pocket and so fires it when needed. So it can take 2 weeks usually for a vaccination to become effective. So if I had my vaccination today for the flu, but then I came across you, James, and you had the flu, then I could still get poorly because my immune system has not had time to have that reaction to the vaccine and to develop those memory cells. Likewise, there's often different strains. So again, if I had the flu vaccination, it doesn't necessarily cover me for every type of flu. You can still catch flu, but you won't catch the strain that was in the vaccine. Okay. And that changes yearly. And as I say as well, if you're a bit under the weather, it's not a good time to go and get a vaccine because you are more likely to have a weakened response to the vaccine and for it to not work to its full efficacy.
I find it interesting that some vaccines last for years and years and years and years. Some of them only last for a much shorter period of time. And like you said, with like the flu is a great example. Every year they come out with a new flu vaccine that hits the flu strains that are coming out. And, you got to go and get it. But if you're slightly off on that flu virus that you're exposed to, because there are many, they look for the most common ones. If you're slightly off, you can still get it. And I find this is a challenge.
But it's a combination of things. So the type of vaccine is important. So as I mentioned, live vaccines tend to give you a longer lasting immunity, but it also depends on the virus or the bacteria. So for instance, flu changes. It's an unstable virus, so it changes each year. And so you've got to readapt your vaccination schedule for what is most likely to come out. And scientists predict this year, we think this is going to be the most common type of flu, and let's try and tailor our vaccine towards that. What is good about COVID-19 is they do believe it is a very stable virus, and therefore, if they produce a vaccination for it, the chances are it will last for a number of years. So it's less likely to be unstable, mutate, and to change, and therefore would remedy the vaccination. Not useless, but it wouldn't cover all aspects of the COVID-19.
One of the things we always hear mentioned when we talk about viruses and vaccines is protecting the community. So you're not just, and I actually saw this today with wearing face mask signs on Al Khail Road here in Dubai. As I said, I was out. I had a permit. And there were big signs with people wearing masks saying, hey, wear your mask. Do it for me. So you're not doing it for you. You're doing it for, and it typically had some older folks in the pictures who were also wearing masks. They said, you're doing it for them. And all I kept looking at is, you know what, that's herd mentality. And that's a big piece that we talk about when we talk about vaccinations and why you would get vaccinated against the flu. You might say, oh, I'm not getting the flu and I don't have to worry about it. You're not doing it for yourself. You're doing it for the rest of the people you're going to interact with to help them.
Well, as I mentioned, there are some vaccines that people can't have because they're live, and it might be somebody that's undergoing chemotherapy or somebody that is on medication that weakens their immune system generally. And therefore, herd immunity is really important. And that just means that effectively, if 80 to 90% of a population have the vaccine, they can't catch it and it stops the spread. So it's almost like if you were to do a visionary for it, you'd put the person that can't have the vaccine in the middle of all these people that are vaccinated against. So then when the virus or the bacteria comes in from the outside, it can't reach the vulnerable person. So it's not just about doing it for you. And it's really important that you do it for you, vaccinations generally, but also for that vulnerable person, because they might want the vaccine, but they can't have it.
Yeah. So as someone who works in the medical profession, I mean, you must have a constant checklist of things that you need to personally get vaccinated with and against yourself because you're in contact with so many people.
Yeah, there are more vaccinations, like typically hepatitis B, hepatitis C. You've got to be vaccinated against, especially because you might get needle stick injuries. They're to be honest, they're probably the only two really that you test. You make sure that healthcare professionals have, but you also need that in the UAE. You can't come to the UAE without having those. And the only difference is that if you were to get a needle stick injury, and that just means that you have pierced somebody's skin with a needle, and then you've accidentally pierced yourself as well. You'd have to go for testing to check for HIV and check for hepatitis as well. Otherwise, it's largely about PPE, isn't it? We've got to be really careful with ourselves and with bodily fluids and also with respiration too. So you have to make sure that you're wearing appropriate equipment and obviously be totally up to date with your childhood vaccination schedule as well.
Yeah, I wonder, and it'll be curious to see in the next 6 months, 8 months, if we see a turn in vaccines where people are just more keen to make sure their vaccinations are up to date and their kids' vaccinations are up to date. Because I sometimes think with vaccinations, I mean, we all have the best intentions, but I sometimes think we get just a little lax in that it can't happen to me, it won't happen to me, or is this really a big thing? Do I really need to have a measles, mumps, and rubella shot? Like, really, when's the last time you heard of anyone having rubella? It's like, really? And boom, here we are in a COVID-19 situation. And, maybe if there's a vaccine, we can make sure that no one ever has it again either.
Well, I think people are scared of not knowing what they're putting into their body or their child's body. But as I've often said to parents is what you're frightened of, is it going to kill you? So you might think, oh, there's junk that goes in these vaccinations. Yes, but has it ever been known to kill somebody? No, but has measles, mumps, or rubella ever killed anybody? Absolutely. So it's that cost benefit ratio. And what you will find as well is that all the reliable sources, all the big government bodies that talk about vaccinations, they are all united in saying, do it, get your child vaccinated. And in fact, there's a lot of schools now that will not allow entry to certain children that aren't vaccinated. You have to have proof that you have been vaccinated against the common childhood illnesses.
I sometimes think back to polio as well and eradication of polio. And as much as where it's eradicated, there are still a couple of countries. Pakistan, I believe, still has one or two cases that cropped up recently. And I could be misspeaking because I haven't looked at the stats, but I'm pretty sure I heard of that. And it's again one of those things. Polio in the 40s. that was a huge issue. Iron lungs in the UK and North America. And who's ever heard of anyone having polio now? No one. But typically we see a lot of work being done to make sure that there's an immunity put in place.
And that there is definitely a resurge in things like measles, by the way, and that's because people aren't getting vaccinated. And I think the problem with the MMR vaccine is there was a huge controversy about it potentially causing autism.
Right.
And that's because at the time of the vaccine, that is when autistic traits tend to come out. And then that was totally eradicated. It was the guys that were involved in producing the study, I think 2 or 3 of them came out to say, look, we were totally wrong. It's been totally disproven. But people still carry on this legacy that the MMR vaccine has got a link with autism. And it's been many years that everybody's come and said that is so not true. So we are starting to get a surge of people that have not vaccinated their children, and the children are developing these illnesses. So there has been a bit more of a spike in the sort of the last 20 years.
When we talk about viruses and we talk about spread of viruses, I sometimes think that our own success in what we've done as entrepreneurial mammals is part of our problem. We've gone from being a very rural to a very urban environment, high concentrations, a lot of sealed environments and indoor environments, and everywhere you go around the world. The crazy thing is finally we're back to an era where maybe you live in a high-rise tower and maybe you can open a window, but even a lot of those are sealed environments, and we're so proud of it. And now, you kind of look back and you say, well, why didn't we have more of this, in the past? And okay, sure, we had the Spanish flu, and yes, we had the Black Plague, and those things did go through. And you look at where they went through and what was going on, it becomes interesting. And it takes me back to a report I was listening to by a historian from in the U.S., and I believe it's Bradbury College is where he was from. Could be Harvard. And he was talking, he's a historian on plagues and things. And what he came back to is he said, the problem with all of these things, and as we're looking at COVID, he said the problem is these kinds of viruses, and he was going back to the Spanish flu and things as well. He says they're entrepreneurial. They're really, really entrepreneurial in that they find this weakness in our societies and they exploit it. And he said, look at the way we live now. We live very well, but we live very close together. And there's so much interaction in these closed environments that it's found a way to spread very effectively. And we will now alter things and we'll change things and we'll change our hygiene routines and whatnot so that we get rid of it. But he said, inevitably, another thing will happen somewhere down the road because it will just find the weakness. And so what's been exposed is a weakness in our lifestyle that unfortunately we're going to have to deal with. And maybe that means and I think that's what scares a lot of people when you talk about apprehension and what's going on is like, so what does this mean? And when people say, oh, I can't wait till things get back to normal, it's like, yeah, well, what's the new normal going to be? And I
not shaking hands.
Exactly, not shaking hands. It's actually interesting because when you think back 6 months ago, Jenna, and think about you're going to the mall, you're going shopping, you're doing stuff. How many people were coughing and sneezing? Lots. You go to the grocery store now, I don't hear anyone cough. I hear no one sneeze, like ever. I don't hear any.
And if they do, everybody's head turns around.
Yeah.
No.
So I think I think because we've isolated a bit, I think we're not passing things as much, but I think now people are really, really hypersensitive to these things, and they're, if you've got a seasonal allergy, you're taking allergy pills. If you've got a cold, you're making sure you're treating it in whatever way is possible. And I think part of this, because going back to where I was with the fact that viruses and things are opportunistic and they find this weakness in us to exploit our environments and exploit the way we live. I think a lot of apprehension comes from people trying to figure out where we're going to be, and will bumping elbows instead of shaking hands. maybe a little bit more. I thought it was an interesting one with, Etihad and Emirates are flying some repatriation flights now, and things you can't take on board. No onboard luggage. You can take your purse, you can take your laptop, but you can't take the roller bag. And I'm thinking, this might be the new way going forward because of.
Oh my goodness, I hope not. James.
But why? When you start thinking about it, it's like,
do you really need to take everything? Do you know though? I kind of hope that humans realize from this that we really aren't king of the jungle. Yeah. And I think humans have been so ignorant, really, for so long. And there was a great graphic piece that I actually shared on Facebook, and I'm not normally so much of a sharer on Facebook. And it was humans don't deserve Earth. And it just showed how we totally have abused Earth, and we just think it's here for us. It's not. We are fighting for survival like everybody else is, just like you see animals in the wild. And I think it might be a bit of a wake-up call for that at the very least.
The big challenge is, as I think about all this, and as I said, again, we've got so much information, and maybe we've got this overload of information, or as I said, the World Health Organization calls it, an infodemic. And it's the challenge of so many people in so many different countries doing things in so many different ways. And it's a challenge trying to figure, I think that creates some apprehension too. Are we doing enough? Are we doing too little? How long is this going to last? And I think there becomes, and sometimes I feel it with myself, it's just kind of like, I'm a little incredulous when I listen to people talking about, well, yeah, I'm going out for a jog. They might be in Canada, or, you see people. I did it the other day. Actually, someone was taking their dog out. Someone I know had posted up on Instagram a picture of their dog on the beach in the water. And I wrote back, I said, I know you just made big eyes. And I wrote back to that person. I said, you get a permit for that? Because everyone I know can get a 10-minute permit sort of to take your dogs out for a walk. But unless you're living on that beach, which you might, but that seems to me more than a 10-minute job to get that animal now back into the house. And if you've interacted with anyone and there's water droplets on it, and you're a carrier and you pet your dog and now you've put it on the dog. I said, that's just kind of irresponsible, dude. No, I didn't write all that, but I'm thinking that,
thought process.
Yeah, I just wrote, hey, how did you get a permit for that? And I think it was sort of that passive aggressive way of saying you shouldn't be posting those pictures. But I kind of see people back home in Canada who are out and stuff, and going back to our own children. So I was talking to one of my sons who's in Toronto, and he says it blows his mind that people are not thinking social distancing as much as they should and just stay home. He said, you go to the grocery store, it's packed and everyone's up against each other. He's going, he drove up, he saw that, and he got in his car and kept going. Well, he was with some mates who were driving so they could go get groceries. They didn't get out. They kept going. They said, well, we're not going here. This is a danger zone. And then I kind of said to them, I said, hold it, how many of you guys were in the car? And he goes, I know. He says, there was two of us. And he says, I'm thinking the same thing. it's
someone worded it really well. It's about, don't do it for you. Don't be worried about you catching the virus. Worry about you might have it, and you could potentially infect somebody else. So it's going back to that, trying to protect the vulnerable. And this doesn't work. There's no point in all this madness if we're not all taking it seriously and playing our part. We mentioned before, we kind of started with a debate of, is it the right thing to continue with? Either way, this is what's happening. And what's the point in everyone going through this if we don't do it properly? That's a decision, it's been made. So we are just players in the chess piece, and we've just got to do as we're told to do.
And I think it becomes a testament to our upbringing as well, because my wife and I were kind of sitting here going, well, who would, we go to the grocery store. One of us goes to the grocery store. We both don't go. One of us stays home. I think yesterday was my day, and it was the first time I'd been out of the house in, I don't know, almost a week. And we kind of looked at each other and said, but who would really know if we both went? I mean, like, really? If we both went in the car, and potentially you could stealth mode, you could have someone lie in the back seat, right? But who would really know? Or we could go in two cars because we have two, so you could go in two. Like, who would really know? And we both kind of looked at each other and said, "Yeah, but that would be wrong." It's like, there's always there's always a way to circumvent the rules, and there's always a way to say, "Yeah, but it means this," and it doesn't. And it says, no. It's calling for you to do something, and ultimately it's calling for your morality to say, yeah, I want to get out of the house. Yes, I want to go walk around. Yes, I want to be more social, but my upbringing tells me you don't do it.
And randomly, I don't know whether you've experienced this, but if you're naturally somebody that plays by the rules, the minute you step outside of them, you get found out.
Yeah.
It's always the goody two shoes. I mean, in school, if I ever did anything slightly wrong, I was always the first to get found out. It's almost like someone out there knows that you're just not meant to do this. And not that it's about getting found out in this situation, but that doesn't help either.
Well, no, and I had my permit today to go to my osteo appointment, and I put in 2 hours, which I thought it was pretty giving me a lot of time. And then as I'm driving home, I'm looking at the clock and I'm going, the clock's ticking down. Whoa. And I'm going, whoa. And then, I'm talking to someone and say, don't worry, if you're a little bit, I'm going, no, but I put in this time to that time. No, that's the rule. That means, but you can have 5 minutes. But if it wanted to give me a buffer of 5 minutes, it would tell me there's a buffer of 5 minutes. There's no buffer. And it's like, but you're going to be okay. It's like, maybe, but I was getting really apprehensive going, the rule. And there's a rule for a reason. So we got to work by the rules. And I just find it odd that people will try and find a way to break those rules simply because they're uncomfortable with the fact that this is not the way they're used to living. And it bugs me.
I get how it bugs you, but I suppose it affects everybody in a slightly different manner. And there are some people that are really struggling with it. I mean, I've had my days that I found it tough, and I've kind of, I started off feeling quite cool with it. Definitely had a little bit of time where I felt a bit turbulent about it. And now I'm kind of like back to the acceptance phase. Yeah. And I think if, you're in a nice villa, you've got a garden, it's probably a lot less traumatic for you. You've got your wife there than somebody that is living on their own in an apartment without a balcony. And I think we've got to kind of, accept that maybe, people are struggling, but as people that are empathetic, we've got to understand that this is just what we've got to do, even if it's terrible. Like, take one for the team.
I think you've got a collective population of 8 million people in the UAE, and think of other countries who wait on every day's news update from the government of, okay, when are we going to start relaxing things a little bit? I think there was that glimmer of hope when the tea and coffee roasters and the nut roasters and the vegetable markets and things got permission to open. No, not the entire malls, not all things, but a few more things are opening. I think everyone's waiting on that collective. Okay, are we going to see some of our shopping centers open? Are we going to see some of our stores open? When are the theaters when are the restaurants going to open for actual sit-in clients? And are we going to see a graduated that opening where, okay, we still have social distancing within those establishments? And that poses a big problem because let's say, let me just use the example, say, of a Chili's. Chili's is a pretty condensed, packed area, or Five Guys and Fries, and I'm just picking random names. There's lots of room in there, but they're pretty packed in. But you need to have that kind of high density patrons, because that's how you make it work as a revenue generating entity. So if you suddenly say, okay, you can only have 30% of your patrons in there at a time when you could actually accommodate a whole bunch more, are they even going to be able to function? So I think all of this starts to wear on people. But all they keep coming back to, like I think everyone does, is when are we going to see some lifting? And at this point, this is that apprehension, right? That we've come back to right at the beginning again of just not knowing. And the reality is, I don't think the authorities know either, because they're looking at the curve and they're looking at things and they're talking to countries and other countries and having those regular meetings to try and say, where are we at? And balance things out.
And people are getting slammed. So Donald Trump's, sort of declaring his position and how he feels on it, and the whole world is slamming him down. Yeah. So it's kind of, and then that will adjust how other governments respond. So maybe they were getting ready to start lifting things. They decide, no, okay, maybe we need to just hang tight, because apart from anything, there's also, a media image to maintain, apart from the fact that there's the whole virus situation going on and they've got to keep people safe. Yeah. So I don't know, James, I'm with you. I'm just I'm living a day at a time. The other day I said, what? It's still only the middle of April? Like, are you kidding me? Because it feels like one very, very long day.
Yeah. You know what? I agree with you. Some days I just sit there and I go, man, where is the time? What day of the week is it anyway? And what's going on? And
Yeah.
I think we were in the garden yesterday. Like you said, we're really lucky that we have a little bit of a yard and it's fenced in, so we're a single family dwelling. So we're in kind of that enviable situation where I can go outside, and if I do, it was funny. We were talking with Colin Thomas, who's worn a track around his yard and his little yard in his place, and I think I did 10 laps, the backyard, up the side, to the front, around the car and back out, all within the confines of where I live. We're lucky we've got a side area. And I think it was 0.68 of a kilometer, and I did that 7 or 8 times. And I thought, okay, this is viable. Because I was really getting a little bit, I need to run. I need to move. And so I just took down the clothesline, and I can run in my area. And it wasn't fast. It was about a 6 minute, 45 second pace. But that's not bad in your yard. And so we're really lucky with that, where, as you said, others don't have that benefit. But it's just, where's it going? And I think that becomes that whole thing. So one of the byproducts of when's this going to end and how's it going is we're sitting outside going, man, it's really light. And it's, we're looking at our watches and we're going, yeah, it's 6:30. It's really light still. And it's just like, because we don't have that reference anymore of going to work, coming home, and you're at work, and the days are getting longer, and the usual references of what we do to mark that the month's changing and is getting long aren't there because we're at home all the time.
But I think you've got to instill them. I mean, I still work by the clock, and it's probably that everyone's got their own coping technique. I have still quite a structured day, and it is partly because I've got children. So I go on their nap times, and I go on the fact that they need to have their bath, etc. So I still sort of stick within my day, and that definitely helps. But by nature, I work well with the structure, and I need to know that there's a division between a weekend and a weekday, and there's a division between a working day and an evening like break time or recreational activities. Yeah. And I think that works well for me. But everybody's different, aren't they? And that's if I didn't have that, I'd be well insane by now. The guys in the white coats will come to take me away.
Oh man, Jenna, this has been a great conversation. We talked a little bit about vaccines. We talked a little Corona. We've talked a little bit about our lives, and we've talked. We just had once again a wonderful DocTalk. We have had a blast, and it's just a lot of fun. I always enjoy this, and as you said, technology has enabled us to connect more amongst us as the group at Podaholiks. We even do the Gang of Five. This was the first week where we had a Gang of Five conversation, so I thought that was kind of fun too.
James, I've actually seen you more than I've seen most other people. So your colourful shirts bring me joy. They keep me going.
Someone has said, James, why do you do this? I said, honestly, these Podaholic podcasts are my therapy. They just keep me connected, and I think I'm more connected with you guys than I am with my own colleagues at the university. I'm connected with my students, and I often say that to them, because they'll often say to me, sir, why you do live teaching all the classes. I don't record anything. I record them and give them to after. Yeah, but I do live teaching. And they're going, you could do it another way. I go, yeah, but I like the connection. I like knowing you're there. I teach a public speaking class, so I get to hear them. And it's just nice to hear the voices and the connection and be part of it. And so I think this is also one of those things. And I hope those folks who are listening also feel the same thing. They hear the harmonics in our voices, the happiness, and the fact that we're not pessimistic, we're optimistic about where things are going, and that information is power, and just enjoying it. So I hope so. Yeah, I hope so as well, because I remember there was a time I was really busy last year, and I was sort of working out with my husband, what could I cut out? He said, well, Jenna, obviously it's going to be the podcasting, that's got to go. I was like, oh no, that doesn't go, James. It's my favourite day of the week, because it's nice to just talk about things and and share thoughts on it. So, and the fact that we're doing it, I hope it inspires other people to go and have conversations about the same thing with their friends, because it's, like you say, knowledge is power, and
and it's enjoyable as well.
On that note, Jenna, I think we got to say goodbye. I think it's time to shut off yet another episode.
Boys down for the nap.
Yeah, well, there you go.
The boys have managed to wangle in an extra half an hour of Paw Patrol here.
Jenna Burton is DocTalk. My name's James Piecowye. You're listening to us on Podaholiks with a K. Find us on all the social media. Podaholiks with a K at gmail.com if you want to get in touch, and of course you do. And if however you're listening to us, make sure you give us a rating and send us a comment. We want to hear what you love, what you don't love. We just want to hear from you. It's that simple. You're listening to Podaholiks.